Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and today's video is based around some testing and a review of Geon's Q2 Wax. So what is it? According to Geon, Q2 Wax is a blend of traditional and fluorine-based waxes in a sophisticated package to create what would be considered a hybrid car wax that can be used as a standalone wax over bare paint or a topper over ceramic coatings. In this review, I'll be putting this wax through its paces to assess its performance in several areas such as its application, looks, feel, hydrophobic behavior, and potential durability, as well as giving you my own personal thoughts. So let's get to it. Starting with the user experience, I have to say that I really like the deodorant stick-like packaging that I think is really smart and practical. It's a great clean and convenient way to dispense the wax onto the applicator, which is also nice, unique, and a thoughtful foam applicator in its own right. So even before I've applied the wax, I'm already enjoying the special user experience. So what's the application like? Well, firstly, it seems to lay down fairly easy with little friction and relatively good coverage. I wouldn't say it's the most effortless application, but I would say it's better than most car waxes. Now it has a recommended 30-minute flash time and bonding period, which basically means that you could wax the whole car and then come back and start buffing it all as a general process. I don't mind that at all, but it obviously means that there's a waiting period compared to many other hybrid waxes that are a wipe on and quicker wipe off process. Now in saying that, I did test leaving Q2 Wax on for several hours on a test panel, and I found that it was still almost identical to wipe off, so that great flexibility and forgiveness is another plus that needs to be highlighted. The wipe off itself is rather good with just a little friction to start with, but that quickly subsides and the rest of the wipe down is fairly nice and easy. Now again, I wouldn't say it's the easiest wax to buff off, as I've definitely used a few others that are even nicer to work with, but I would still say it's really up there, and I think Geon has done a great job here all round. Now on this second test panel, I decided to test how Q2 Wax works over one of Geon's own coatings, Pure Evo. I also did test sections with just the coating and the wax on their own as a comparison to further test Q2 Wax as a topper and gather more information. Geon claims that Q2 Wax can also be applied over their coatings as a sacrificial layer to protect the coating while it's still curing in the first week. I applied Pure Evo coating, waited 24 hours, and then applied Q2 Wax over the coating before the panel was allowed to fully cure for over a week before testing. So after the test panels were allowed to cure indoors for over a week, the next test was assessing Q2 Wax's ability to improve the look of automotive paint, as well as the look of Pure Evo ceramic coating. Now as always guys, I try to film these videos in a way that also allows you to judge the results for yourselves and try to expose the panels to several forms of light to gain as much helpful information as possible while still giving you my own assessment. Starting with the red panel, I do have to point out that unlike the black panel, I observed what we used to call wax sweating but is now more referred to as ghosting. So this is basically a light haze that sometimes develops in the finish when using certain waxes and sealants on car paint. You can usually just wipe it off in many cases like I was able to do here. Sometimes you do need an IPA wipe, but in most cases it tends to resurface after a few minutes unless you really strip it back. Why does it occur? It can be due to a few things, but it's basically a bonding issue with the surface and something that some waxes can be more prone to than others. Now although I prepared and applied the wax identically on both panels, it was only the red panel that suffered from ghosting. So I'm more than happy to give the Geon Wax the benefit of the doubt here and take the blame that something wasn't quite right on the red panel. The only other wax or sealant that I can remember getting ghosting in the finish a few times was with Soft 99 Fuso Coat. Now it wasn't like it happened all the time, but I do remember it being an issue on several occasions. Apart from that, I do think that once the haze was removed, Q2 Wax did seem to improve the look of the red metallic paint to some extent, though I can't say it was extremely noticeable on that panel. Now on the black panel, I think it's a much clearer and better result to observe. This is also the reason why I leave compounding haze in the finish, because it really helps so much in determining the ability of a paint protection product to improve the finish and to what extent. There's just no doubting that the section with Pure Evo and Pure Evo with the wax on top have done so much more to elevate the paint's look compared to the Q2 wax on its own. The sections on either end with a ceramic coating display far better reflective gloss, greater amounts of clarity, loads more saturation, and have filled in the compounding haze to a far greater level. In fact, it's really not all that close. Good ceramic coatings do lay down much thicker than most waxes, and in my experience do tend to have a more dramatic effect on the paint, so it may not be a fair test in that regard. Now, in saying that, you can still see that Q2 wax has in fact improved the look of the bare paint to some level, as it is a touch more glossy and saturated. But this is where things get a little strange. Looking at all three sections, I have to point out that the section on the left with Pure Evo coating on its own, at least to my eyes, does look like the best overall finish. Now, the section on the right is pretty close and still looks quite good with Q2 wax over Pure Evo coating, but it's still not quite as good, which I really wasn't expecting. The next test was evaluating the slickness and lack of friction the Q2 wax creates on the surface of automotive paint. All in all, guys, what you'll hopefully be able to see in the footage is that Q2 wax does in fact leave a rather nice, slick and low friction finish behind on the paint. I'd actually say that compared to most car waxes, it could perhaps be one of the better ones as far as slickness goes. As even before I did this testing, I could already feel as I was buffing the wax off that it does feel super nice to the touch. Now compare that to Geon's Pure Evo coating and it's a night and day difference, as Pure Evo is potentially the grippiest ceramic coating I've ever used in my life. So one great thing I was able to discover here is that a layer of Q2 wax over Pure Evo coating completely transforms its feel from super grippy to super slick and creates an almost completely friction-free surface, which I think is fantastic. So onto some water behavior testing. As I continue to introduce various water spray patterns and volumes of water over the test panel, what you'll hopefully see is that all three sections are in fact displaying extremely good hydrophobic behavior across the board with quick water sheeting rates and nice propped up water bead contact angles. So what does this mean in relation to the hydrophobic ability of Q2 wax? Basically, it's very impressive for a car wax to display hydrophobic behavior that's on par with a well-performing ceramic coating such as Pure Evo. It's really not the norm in my experience. So it's safe to say that Geon has done quite an exceptional job here with the water behavior of this wax, and I tend to think that in the realm of pace car waxes, this would have to be one of the most hydrophobic ones around. Now, although there's really not much in it from one section to the other, it is still evident that the left side with Pure Evo coating is a touch better than the middle section with Q2 wax, while the right side section with Pure Evo and Q2 wax on top is a little less hydrophobic than the other two. Why the wax wouldn't perform as well over the coating as it does on its own, I'm not sure, but that seemed to be the case. The final test in this review was a chemical resistance test to try and predict the potential durability of Q2 wax. CarPro Multi-X was used at a 1:3 dilution, firstly just slightly hitting the panel and then getting more and more aggressive with each subsequent application. Now, focusing in on the middle section with Q2 wax, what you'll see by the end is that it seemed to resist the chemical very well. There was only a minor loss of performance in the first few chemical applications, and it wasn't until the fourth or so hit that I really started to see a more dramatic deterioration in its behavior. So all in all, at least as a car wax, I think it did better than most in this area, and I would expect it to last a little longer than your typical car wax. So shifting focus to the left side with Pure Evo coating, you'll see that from start to finish there was just the slightest loss of performance, meaning that Evo resisted the chemical extremely well as a good ceramic coating should. On the right side section with Q2 wax over Pure Evo coating, this is where things got a little more complicated. As you'll hopefully see, this right side section did far better than the middle section with Q2 wax, but not as good as the left section with Pure Evo. Now as the testing progressed, my thinking was, well, it's Q2 wax's remaining residue that's masking the coating underneath. So if I continue to strip the wax off, then the coating behavior underneath should eventually come through. That, however, just didn't happen. In fact, the more I tried to strip the wax off the right side section, the performance just continued to deteriorate. I'll talk more about this in a bit, but it seemed like using Q2 wax over Pure Evo coating did affect the coating's potential long-term durability. So on to my conclusions. As you guys have a look at the water behavior in chemical testing on the red panel, I'll start by saying that I do believe that for whatever reason there was a bonding issue with Q2 wax on this panel, as apart from the ghosting I talked about before, you'll see in a bit that during the chemical testing, as soon as I wiped the panel over, it immediately stripped the wax off in an instant. So as I mentioned earlier, I'd prefer taking responsibility for that and citing some preparation, environmental or application issue rather than blaming the wax. With all these product reviews I do, I never once rely on a single test to draw my conclusions. It's always based around multiple applications, many of which I do before making these videos to get a feel for the products I'm testing prior to filming. I think most of you would be surprised just how much time and work goes into a single review. Having said that, these were my observations and personal thoughts and conclusions. As far as the application of Q2 wax goes, I think Geon has done an amazing job here, which not only extends to its rather nice, easy and forgiving user experience, but also to the thoughtful and unique packaging design. I really like the feel and slickness it creates on the surface of the paint, and I do think it'll help in reducing wash or wipe-induced swirl marks with that reduced friction. Q2 Wax's hydrophobic performance is without a doubt impressive as far as the paste wax goes, and I want to highlight this because although having fantastic water behavior in a ceramic coating and spray coating or wax is fairly common, it's a much harder thing to achieve in my experience with a paste consistency wax. As far as chemical resistance and potential durability goes, I also think it did really well in this area, and 3 to 6 months longevity is definitely a possibility in my opinion. Moving on to the look of Q2 wax, I have to be honest in saying that although it looks okay as a standalone wax, it's just not an area in its characteristics that overly impress me. I was just expecting, or at least hoping for a little more in the way of saturation, gloss and depth in its finish that good paste waxes in general tend to display. The other thing that has to be said is that when applied over a great looking ceramic coating, It just didn't seem to improve its look, and if anything, had the opposite effect. I think the biggest question is its application and performance over a ceramic coating. Now I know Geon stated in a video that you can use Q2 wax over their existing ceramic coatings as a sacrificial layer to protect the coating while it's still fully curing. Based on my own testing, I just don't think this is a good idea. As someone who's applied ceramic coatings professionally for a decade or so, I've come to learn more so in the past few years that the best performance I've achieved with all ceramic coatings is when they're allowed to fully cure, which in most cases is at least a few weeks up to a month before you apply anything over them. And if you want to apply a sacrificial layer during that curing process, it shouldn't be anything more than a super light, low content, water-based quick detailer. Now look guys, I certainly can't be sure, but if I had to guess why the test section with Q2 wax over Pure Evo coating didn't perform too well, it would be because it fused with a partially cured ceramic coating rather than a fully cured one. There's so much more testing that can be done to try and get better answers, but I'd like to think that Geon did more thorough testing in providing their recommendations in this area. There's always more that can be done when it comes to testing. I had a comment on a video a while back where the person listed about a dozen additional tests he'd like to see in my video reviews, all of which I thought, sure, that would be good to test, evaluate and show. But here's the thing, apart from it becoming an hour-long plus video, I already spend the best part of a week planning, researching, testing, filming and editing these videos. Not to mention that I have an additional job, family, other responsibilities, and a life that I'd pretty much have to give up to produce such videos. Also taking into account that this video's revenue isn't even going to come close to reimbursing me the cost of the product. So I also have to live guys, and at least for now, this is the best I can do, and I hope it's valued and appreciated because it's a lot of hard work as it stands right now. I think I'll leave it there guys, and if you enjoyed this video and would like to say thanks and help support future content, you can do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ccad, in which I'll leave a link to in the description box, or you can now hit the thanks button below the video. And thank you everyone for the support so far. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please share it with others, give it a like and comment below to show your support for this content, and I'll see you guys soon.